today, the logical question to ask, and I'm not making this up, is atheism dead?
Well, I bloody hope not. He was only 2 days away from retirement. Nope, wait, that's an old cop in a movie. No, atheism can't be dead because what does that even mean? You can't kill an idea. Ideas are bulletproof and bomb-proof and even stab-proof. We really should start making armor out of them. What do you think? This one's made out of the idea of God doing a reel. Don't I look fantastic? What do you mean naked? No, the man who doesn't make things up told me that this is the latest fashion.
I actually say atheism as an intellectual idea is dead. There may be a lot of atheists, but there are a lot of flat earthers.
Oh wow, you can just fuck all the way off in so many different directions. Comparing atheism to being a flat earther is completely absurd. Flat earthers deny tons of demonstrable evidence for, well, basically everything ever, but mostly for the shape of the planet. Atheists reject an assertion that there is a God based on the fact that there isn't much, if any, demonstrable evidence for God. Also that he's fake doesn't help either.
It doesn't change the fact that we know the earth is not flat.
Are you actually suggesting that we know there is a God? That is fucking news to me and every single person who either doesn't believe there is, or more importantly, all the people who say that you in fact can't know, but you don't need to know because it's a matter of faith, aka believing in something despite the fact that there's piss all proof for it. Anyway, the claim is whether or not atheism is dead, and surely, if there are people who hold to it, the answer is fucking no. The assertion isn't atheism is true, although on that note, you have just debunked an oft-touted claim that we know Crimsbianity is true because look how popular it is. So I hope you've never used that one like the giant dumbass that you are.
But the idea that this comes from science, I just find it so ironic.
Who the fuck says atheism comes from science? Again, atheism is just a rejection of a claim. Now, do atheism and science seem to complement each other rather nicely? Seeing as atheists often reject the supernatural, and science is literally the pursuit of understanding how the natural world works, with little to no interest in the supernatural, plus the fact that if it could study the supernatural, that would just make it more of nature. So I think the true irony is just that you're going to try to use science to prove the supernatural, which doesn't make any sense, and that's somehow going to debunk atheism. And I'll be honest, I just don't think atheism is going to care. It'll be too busy being cool and attractive at parties.
Because, I mean, the Big Bang's classic example. When I find all this stuff funny, right?
I mean, morons often do find their misunderstanding of scientific ideas and or their history very, very funny. But that's because, you know, they are pathologically stupid and are so very easily amused. I can't really think of any good reason that it would be funny, but that's because there aren't any. Well, aside from the fact that it's called the Big Bang. Bang means sex. Lol, 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 lol.
Einstein, in 1911, you can't think of a greater scientist except for Isaac Newton than Albert Einstein.
I have always hated this guy did a big smart, so am the big authority guy. Because the thing about science and what makes it so powerful isn't individuals working alone on grand projects, but the fact that it is so collaborative. Tens, hundreds, even thousands of people working together over time and space to figure out how some aspect of the universe works. And even those guys had their ideas, as good as they were, corrected and improved by other scientists. That is what has allowed it to become the epistemological powerhouse it is today, not just some smart guys doing a smart one time.
In 1911, his equations were leading him to believe the universe is expanding, which means that if it's expanding, that at one point, if you go backwards from where it expanded, that it started at a single point. This was what Einstein came up with privately.
Privately is such an odd word to use. I mean, for the most part, most of what he was doing at that time would have been private because he didn't actually publish the thing that he was known for until like 1915, I think. But you make it sound clandestine, when it was probably just one of many ideas knocking around in his head at that specific time. Better to keep working at something until you're sure about it, rather than to throw it out undercooked.
He As a scientist, he thought, this is embarrassing. People are going to accuse me of being a creationist, of talking about the Bible. So I have to hide this information. So he created this cosmological constant, this fudge factor, because he was so embarrassed by what the evidence from science was showing.
First off, the evidence from science. It was his work. It wasn't fucking science yet. It was the conclusions from his calculations. But that doesn't mean he wasn't wrong or hadn't screwed something up. And it wasn't about being embarrassed. If anything, it was likely because he was being humble. Because as I understand of the science of the time, it said that the universe was more or less static, as up until that point, there hadn't been any good evidence that the universe was doing an expand. Basically, he added the fudge because he assumed that he was missing something, as the universe, under his calculus, should be collapsing. And that was a bit of a problem, seeing as it wasn't.
And a few years later, he had to eat crow because other people said, hey, guess what, Einstein?
I'm pretty sure he didn't mean it like this, but he basically just did the call someone Einstein ironically because they are actually a massive dumbass thing to literally fucking Einstein. If I thought for even a second that you did that on purpose, I would believe you to be an absolute comedy genius, especially as he was literally at the forefront of many fields at the time. So even shit he was wrong about is hardly an embarrassing blunder and more the result of being a goddamn pioneer.
You're wrong. It is expanding, or at least you're right, but you didn't,
He was wrong that it should be collapsing. Presumably he hadn't even considered that it was expanding, at least in his calculus, because there's no evidence for that, as there wasn't for it contracting either. It's just that he was missing data, and he almost certainly assumed that was the problem. His blunder ultimately was concerning himself with correcting for things he didn't know, instead of just saying, here's what my shit says, maybe there's something we're missing, but this is the conclusion to that, which is akin to the singularity not actually being what we think happens at the start of the universe, but just is the conclusion of the models. Let's do some goddamn science on the bitches. But he would have said it with a German accent. At no point was he worried about saying that the universe was expanding, mostly because, again, his model didn't predict that.
And so this concept of the Big Bang developed where scientists were embarrassed because they said, well, it looks like the universe was created out of nothing.
Why would they be embarrassed? If that's what all the data pointed to, that's a perfectly cromulent conclusion to come to. You go, oh, okay, now what does that actually mean? More science, please. Although, it doesn't actually say that. Presumably, even at the time, the singularity, whether it's actually what's there or not, has never described nothing. It describes a point where everything is. If there's something that's more something than anything that's ever been, it's fucking that.
That's what science is saying, wow. But it makes us uncomfortable because we want to believe the universe existed forever.
What the fuck are you talking about? Scientists, as a rule, don't want any answer but for actually correct ones. That's why they do fucking science. And, universe exists finitely doesn't automatically translate to God must have done that, just as much as the universe appears to be static and has existed forever, almost certainly wouldn't put a dent in God did it, since, he's a fucking God. He can make the universe look any amount old and appear whenever he likes. The fact that the Bible presents the universe creation as some sort of art installation, and what the science is saying is a very different process, only hurts that position, while doing nothing to these straw man scientists you are making up positions for.
And so the first chapter of the book, in some ways, is the least interesting of all the science chapters, but just this idea of people dragging their heels and saying, this makes me uncomfortable because it looks like it shows the existence of a creator God.
The idea that you made up. Good job, face. But even if you mean that they didn't immediately accept this new paradigm that was vastly different from the old understanding of the universe, well, fucking good. New ideas, no matter how correct they end up being, need to be tested before being accepted. Again, Einstein is the perfect example. He didn't accept the conclusions from his calculations, not because it suggested something he wasn't happy with, but because it suggested something that didn't comport with reality as he understood it. As soon as more evidence came to light, he was like, holy shit, that's why my thing did that. Fucking A, mate. But again, in a German accent. This idea that scientists just constantly try to dodge the conclusions of the science that they are doing is a nonsense story you pulled straight from betwixt your idiotic butt cheeks.
But no joke, that is the least compelling. The evidence from science that has come out of what's called the fine-tuning argument is so insane that I just scratched the surface in this book.
Well, of course it's not a joke. That's what makes the ridiculous shit you say so very funny. You actually think that you're making some kind of good point and not just waffling incoherently. And calling fine-tuning shit insane is surprisingly accurate, since anyone who thinks that idea proves anything beyond the universe is the way it is, and if it wasn't, it wouldn't be that way, and you wouldn't be here to notice, is downright certifiable. And all you did in your book was scratch the surface, did you? So it's all extremely superficial. What a fucking surprise.
But that is something that in our lifetimes, the evidence from science for a fine-tuned universe, that everything is calibrated so perfectly that it doesn't make sense that it just happened.
Well, I've got some good news for you. It didn't just happen. It's the result of systems falling into relative balance. But you know what that isn't? The same thing as someone doing it on purpose. Because he really, really wanted you to exist so he could be your best friend. Especially considering from a scientific perspective, there's no reason to do it like that. A big, empty universe full of so much nothing that also kills you all the time when you are an all-power boy does not make sense. And in your case, to do it at all really doesn't make sense, since your existence feels like the exact opposite of science.
That is the killer. It's killer evidence.
So apparently we're using a new definition of killer, which means shit, certainly as evidence that would prove any kind of God. Because if we give you everything as accurate instead of scientifically illiterate garbage that it is, both the Big Bang resulting in a universe starting from supposedly nothing and the universe being fine-tuned, with the implication that that's the only way that life could have occurred, that still does nothing but say that's how those things happened maybe. It doesn't give you God did it, and it certainly doesn't give you a specific God did it. The only thing you can try to do is make it fit in with your book though, and even that is a failure, since the Big Bang doesn't sound like the Bible's explanation for where the universe came from, and fine-tuning is completely unnecessary for an all-powerful God. He could just make life happen regardless of the state of the everything around them. Fuck. Then God though would actually be more likely, because at least that could make some amount of sense of it. But as it is, he's completely unnecessary.
So talk a little bit about that. What has science discovered that essentially proves this argument? Can you recount some of that?
Well,
for us?
it would be kind of like we'd all say, like, we all believe in chance. So if I flip a quarter, it could go heads or tails, right?
Oh, fuck me. I hope he's not going to do the chances of X thing happening are 80 bajillion to the power of God. Therefore, God done it. Which is so bad as arguments go, because they never explain how they got that number, what the variables are, and it's always stated as a single chance, when these things happen based on near endless chances for them to happen. And again, just because something is unlikely, A, if it happened, it fucking happened. And B, still doesn't mean someone did it on purpose. I mean, my existence was just as infinitely unlikely as anyone else's, and my parents constantly tell me that wasn't an on purpose, although not in those exact words, and usually from through their front door when I'm trying to visit for Christmas.
Great. What if I flip a quarter and it lands on its edge? You'd be like, whoa, that's weird, but it could happen. It could happen, okay?
No, I would be like, someone's been playing Soul Reaver too.
But suppose you throw a coin enough times. Suppose one day it lands on its edge.
And then I would get really jealous because I want to play that game, it's really good. And then of course I would stab myself in the chest with the sword that is my own soul and remark that history abhors a paradox. that game about time-traveling vampires fighting eldritch horrors across multiple realities really had no right to go that fucking hard.
But imagine I flip it again and it does it again. What are the odds of that? Astronomical.
Well, the odds of one side landing is like 1 in 6,000, which is surprisingly common. But I suppose it completely depends on the kind of coin you flip. Something with a flat edge is going to be way more likely, and something with a curved or even like a pointed edge is going to be way less so. But going the average, that means that 2 times in a row is about 1 in 36 million, which while still incredibly rare, is not even close to what I would call astronomical. I mean, if literally everyone on Earth flipped 2 coins in a row, that would mean about 230 of them, give or take, would get that. And that's only if you tried the experiment one single time. If they all kept flipping coins over and over and over again, it would happen literally constantly. Because that's the nature of big number scary. If it's possible and you try it enough times, you effectively make that thing an absolute guarantee.
Okay, I flip it again. It happens again. What if it happens 100 times in a row? You would also all look around and go, this is not, something weird is happening.
That is a trick quarter.
Okay, something is weird is happening because
anyone spent enough time with you to do anything, even a task that would only take a few minutes tops, without immediately trying to top themselves with said coin. Again, while the numbers are astronomical, actually this time, not the fake astronomical of before, that doesn't mean anything. The odds of any given shuffling of a deck of cards is something like 11 squintillion. And even if you shuffle it again, the chances of the second new shuffle being the one you get after the first one is even more squintillion-y. But that doesn't mean you didn't get those 2 shuffles. It doesn't mean that the deck is rigged or a trick pack. So even if the universe is the result of incredible amounts of chance happens. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a chance.
chance cannot produce that over and over and over and over. There's something's weird, okay?
Just because something is weird doesn't mean that it cannot happen. And weird in science is good. It's a cool thing. It's the thing that makes you go, oh, that's interesting. Let's investigate it. Figure out how or why that happens. All you have here is the universe is unlikely, and instead of saying, that's interesting, let's figure out why that happened that way, you instead decided, well, then that means God did it, and you dust off your hands and then wander off in a random direction, presumably into some kind of well. And honestly, what's truly weird is the fact that you somehow think that atheism is dead and yet felt the need to write a fucking book about it, while misrepresenting science in order to justify that stance. Which is what this entire meeting of the mindless was all about. Fuck me.
That's basically what happened with science. They would discover something really freaky, and they would say, well, I guess it's just chance.
That's not true and is projection of the highest order. You are claiming that scientists, you know, the people who actually put the effort to bother figuring anything out in the first place, they are intellectually lazy and just shrug and say, well, I guess it was all just chance. When your entire conclusion is to shrug your shoulders and say that God did it. Hypocrisy, thy name is this fucking book peddling dumbass. Bye!